Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones, back here today in a really interesting spot for Purdue basketball because the Boilermakers fell to Indiana on Saturday. The Hoosiers have now swept Purdue in the season for the first time in a decade. However, Purdue did clinch at least a share of its 25th Big Ten championship on Sunday. Today, as I record this, because Northwestern lost at Maryland. So with 2 games to play, everyone else is at least 2 games behind Purdue, meaning the Boilermakers can get that 25th Big Ten championship banner printed and hung up in Mackey Arena. But even with that championship, the vibes aren't great around Purdue. So we're going to talk about the Indiana game, kind of talk about where Purdue is, and of course, talk about that Big Ten championship here today. Real quick, if you don't already, be sure to follow on Twitter at Boilers Beyond. Lots of good engagement there. I know, heard from a number of you last night. Always do like hearing from you all. So be sure to follow there and be sure to subscribe. Again, I'm coming with episodes 2 times a week until the season ends, so be sure to follow along there, wherever you get your podcasts so that you don't miss anything. But, you know, the story is Purdue loses 79-71 to Indiana, and really, for most of the second half, this game didn't feel in doubt. Indiana kind of controlled that thing after they went on that run to start the second half. Purdue never really made it feel like they were going to come back and win the thing. Jalen Hood-Schifino absolutely torched Purdue. Freshman guard for Indiana had 35 points on 14 for 24 from the field. Pretty good, but did that with only making 1 3-pointer too. He absolutely killed Purdue. He was the best player on the floor last night. Pretty impressive game from him, but it caps off Indiana's first sweep of Purdue since 2013, when Purdue was terrible and Indiana was very, very good that season. Things have changed quite a bit in the 2 programs since then, but Indiana completes the sweep. Really, they outplayed Purdue in every aspect. I think if you just look at the box score and you just look at the shooting percentages, it tells you all you need to know. Indiana shot 50% from the field, 46% from 3. Purdue goes 34% from the field and 21% from 3. And that 21% figure is a little generous when you look at the context of the game, because Purdue made 2 threes in what amounted to garbage time. At one point, Purdue was 3 for 20 from 3-point range, 15%. Just not good. That tells you all you need to know. Purdue did a really nice job of not letting Trayce Jackson-Davis score all over them. That was certainly a priority for Purdue, and they executed that well, but it came at a cost. Trayce Jackson-Davis did an excellent job of passing out of the double teams, and he did a really nice job at finding open shooters. And Indiana's not a team that shoots a ton of threes, but they are a decent 3-point shooting team when it comes to percentages. They're not going to shoot a crazy high volume of them, but they'll make them. And they did. They went 7 for 16 from 3, 7 for 15 from 3. And that was enough to do it. Obviously, with Purdue's game plan here, they were content. Maybe not content, but they were going to live with Jalen Hood-Schifino taking mid-range 2s. It is certainly a strength of his, but I think when you look at the Hoosiers, you want to avoid Trayce Jackson-Davis going crazy on you, and you want to avoid their 3-point shooters just having a field day on you. And Purdue was able to do that, really. Purdue did a nice job of containing Jackson Davis, but Hood Schifino in the mid-range just got so hot that it was killing Purdue. He kept them in the game in the first half. Really, Purdue should have been winning this game by more than the 4 that they were at halftime. In the first half, Indiana scored 34 points. 23 of those came from Hood Schifino. They only had 3 players score in the first half. So Purdue should have been up more than they were, but Purdue didn't shoot well. Purdue didn't capitalize on opportunities they had to get out in front. I think they were up 7 or 8 at one point, but they could never extend that. And ultimately, when they came out of the locker room, Indiana just buried them. Miller Kopp, Trey Galloway did a really nice job. Trey Galloway is a guy who's gotten so much better at Indiana. He's turned into a pretty good player, and he had a really good game for them on Saturday night. Miller Kopp, you know what he is. He's a good shooter. He got uncovered a little bit too much. But, at the end of the day, you can dissect Purdue all you want. Certainly it wasn't their best defensive game. Give Indiana credit for making shots. The shots were there, but you got to make them still, and Indiana did. But you're not going to win games when you shoot 34% from the field and 21% from 3. Right now, Purdue is not a good shooting team. As a team, they're shooting 45.9% from the field, and that's not bad. But 33% from 3 isn't good. It's not where it needs to be. You can point to whoever you'd like. You can look at Ethan Morton. You can look at Fletcher Lawyer. You can look at Caleb First. Guys that you expect to knock down some threes that really aren't right now. But it's not just a one-player problem. It's a holistic issue. And I think that is becoming a pretty big concern. You're not going to win many games allowing 79 points. That's just as big of a problem. But when you look at what Purdue's offense is, you know how dangerous the scheme can be when Purdue has that big guy who is efficient, surrounded by good shooting. You have the best player in the country down low, but the shooting isn't helping him. I keep thinking Purdue's due for one of those games where they just break out and hit a bunch of threes. But outside of just Mason Gillis against Penn State, it really hasn't happened. Last night, Edey didn't have his best game. He didn't have the touch on his shots that sometimes he does. He had 26, but 8 for 17 from the field. Not great. But the issue comes back to the shooting. 5 for 23 from three-point range. It's just not going to cut it. You look at how this game went. Purdue out-rebounded Indiana by 16. Purdue shot 21 more free throws than Indiana. And they still lost going away. That's tough. But when you're not making shots the way Purdue didn't, and you're not getting stops the way Purdue didn't, you're in some trouble. It's certainly not from a lack of effort. This is a team that plays hard. This is a team that's certainly still learning. But it was a rough game for Purdue. There's no denying that. It's certainly a bummer to get swept by your rival. It's certainly a bummer when the Big Ten championship trophy is in Mackey Arena, and I'm sure they had all the confetti ready to go, and you don't get to use it. And fans are filing out, with a couple minutes to go. It was a rough night for Purdue. It really was. I think this was the first game of Purdue's season that they lost where I think you really have to start looking at some of these problems for Purdue. I think you can point to those Northwestern and Maryland games as Purdue really not handling officiating well, not handling road crowds well. The turnovers were such a key part of 3 of Purdue's losses: Northwestern, Indiana, and Rutgers. And then Maryland just kind of happened the way Maryland happened. But it wasn't turnovers for Purdue. They only had 10 of them. That's a fine number. That's fine. But to shoot as poorly as they did and to allow Indiana to shoot as well as they did, it's just not... It raises concerns. It really does. It raises the concern. What happens when you see a guy like Jalen Hood-Schifino? There aren't tons of guys like him out there, but there are really talented guards. Can Purdue slow them down enough? If Purdue isn't knocking down 3-point shots, how do they put points on the board outside of Zach Edey? I mean, all of these questions are coming up a little bit, and it's important to contextualize it all. Purdue's still 24-5. You had all the people on Twitter, we got the Matt Fire Painter guy in my mentions, and, the Sky is Falling crew, and Matt Painter's not being fired. Matt Painter shouldn't be fired. The sky isn't falling, but there are some reasons for concern here. For starters, we'll see what the brackets, the mock brackets look like on Monday and Tuesday and all of that. But it's very plausible that Purdue's going to fall off the 1 line, and they're going to have a tough time getting back there. You're kind of running out of time here to boost your resume, especially when you have Wisconsin. That's going to be a fringe quad 1 game. They are right around that 75 mark in the net. I'm recording this now as they're playing Michigan. It's on the TV in the other room, so I'm not sure what the score is, but Michigan was up at halftime. Illinois, that's not going to be a quad 1 game. They just lost at Ohio State. They're up and down, but neither of those wins, if Purdue should get them, would be big resume boosters. So you may have cost yourself a 1 seed, and I don't know that you can play yourself back there in conference tournaments. It gets hard. Purdue let an opportunity slip away, and it's not the end of the world. Kind of the defining mindset that you see is, it's all about the NCAA tournament. Purdue fans want to win in the NCAA tournament badly, and thankfully that wasn't what happened on Saturday. It wasn't the NCAA tournament. You're getting close to it. I don't know that Purdue is necessarily trending in the right direction, but as Matt Painter did say in his post-game press conference, 2018-19, Carson Edwards shot 28% from 3 in Big Ten play. And then the switch flipped in the NCAA tournament, and nobody remembers how much Carson Edwards struggled in Big Ten play that year. Even a lot of Purdue fans, I think, tend to forget that. They just remember what he did in the NCAA tournament. Is this Purdue team due for some of those shots to fall? Maybe. They certainly could be. But it's okay to be concerned. It's okay to be a little bit frustrated. I think it's hard to be really mad about this because, Purdue's still overachieving based off any possible preseason expectation. And it absolutely changes. The mindset does change. When you get off to, what did Purdue start? 14-1, maybe 14-0, maybe. They were 21-1. Is that right? Your expectations change. Purdue's lost 4 of their last 6 games now, but you're still overall in a good spot. Purdue clinched a share of the Big Ten championship today. It is remarkably bizarre how the timing worked. Purdue plays this big game Saturday night. They do not play well. But then they come out on Sunday, just turn on Big Ten Network, watch Maryland eviscerate Northwestern, and they clinch a share of the Big Ten championship. I know it's not going to be, and just judging off reaction, on Twitter, on message boards, it's not the most exciting Big Ten championship Purdue has ever won. Is it the most improbable? It's probably right up there. Purdue winning this Big Ten championship, winning a share of it at least, it's pretty impressive. Purdue lost 3.5 starters from last year, starting 2 freshman guards to come out and win the Big Ten, and potentially how things fall, win it outright or maybe win it by multiple games. That's pretty impressive. That this is a big deal. Now, the Big Ten championship isn't an NCAA tournament run. It's not the be-all, end-all for folks. But I think you can look at what Purdue has done here and be very, very happy with it. The next few weeks will go a long way in determining how folks feel about this season. Can Purdue finish out with a couple of wins here? Can they go on a little run in the Big Ten tournament, get to Saturday or Sunday? Can they stack some wins in the NCAA tournament? All of this is still on the table. Nothing has gone away. And in fact, Purdue's clinched one of their goals here. So you should enjoy the Big Ten championship. It certainly says something about where the Purdue program is, that there is an underwhelmed feeling today as Purdue clinched a Big Ten championship. That speaks really well on the program. Now, I'm not blaming anyone for feeling a little underwhelmed. I think that is understandable. I think it is, certainly a weird spot to be in. But as you sit here and look at this holistically, you have plenty of reason to be bummed. That's a tough loss. That was a great atmosphere in Mackey Arena that had the air sucked out of it for most of the second half. It was quiet in there. It was a bummer for Purdue fans, but its goals are still ahead of it. You've checked one off the list, and you have 2 games this week that you're going to be favored in. Now, the Kohl Center is weird. It's not the easiest place to play. Purdue's had some success there. We'll certainly talk about that game later in the midweek episode, but you can feel fine about that. Illinois, you have no idea what you're going to get. They are up and down like a heart rate monitor, but again, it's a game Purdue can win, especially at home. You're sending David Jenkins Jr. out, so it's not like it's necessarily going to be the most emotional senior day, but you'd like to close this thing out. Close it out strong. Win the Big Ten outright. I think that would be a really big deal to be the only Big Ten champion. Get that number 1 seed and head up to Chicago. From there, time will tell. But, a tough one. A really tough pill to swallow last night. You can sit here and blame individual players. There's no shortage of folks talking about Braden Smith, talking about Ethan Morton, Fletcher Lawyer, guys who didn't have their best games. But, I think the problem is that in this loss, it was a lot more than just one player. It was a holistic issue. And can Purdue get it corrected? They certainly can. We've seen this team play some excellent basketball, but time will tell. We shall see how things go. But that's all I've got for today. I'm sorry this wasn't really the longest episode. I didn't get a ton prepared. I just kind of wanted to talk about where things were going. And, Purdue is the Big Ten champions. So it's a weird spot to be in. I'll do another Q&A episode midweek. So send in questions on Twitter at BoilersBeyond. I have a number of NCAA tournament-related questions from last week. So if yours wasn't answered then, I will get to it later this week. I'm planning on recording that Tuesday night, publishing it on Wednesday morning. So you'll have that then. But send anything over to me on Twitter. And until next time, guys, take care.